Sunday morning, after another restless night, my anger and rage began to subside. I spent Saturday getting drunk and immersed in his thoughts, like a zombie watching TV. I couldn't remember a single program I watched. Then I started thinking like a normal person. The rational parts of my brain reminded me, "You've been suspecting this for 4 years. This shouldn't surprise you." One good, rational thought led to another. I didn't trust my wife. It was that simple. I caused myself so much stress and spent so much money trying to prove that she was cheating. Every time I was told there was nothing, I felt a perverse mixture of relief and disbelief. The lack of evidence only increased my suspicions. I was stuck in a painful cycle of my own making. This realization made me feel stupid. When she finally cheated, she didn't do it behind my back. She rubbed it on my face. She did everything she could to make me feel like all that money was burning away. All those years of marriage are now wasted. It was of little consolation to me that I would technically get more money after the divorce. Damn it, talking about the division of property only intensified this feeling. Here's a little for your troubles. Don't spend everything on one private detective. Divorce was the only way out. The more I thought about it, the more I became convinced of this, even though I doubted all my other decisions. I couldn't be with a woman who could treat her husband like that while claiming to love him. She had a 4-year affair, albeit without sex, with her boss, and in classic cake lover fashion, left in a blaze of glory. Oh, so what? Her loss, I thought. The next thought was better. I could play just as dirty. I could try to fool my wife. I could put off filing for divorce and split the finances instead. Maybe a temporary separation based on my lawyer's recommendations. Separation or not, I wasn't going to have sex with her anymore, so it would only be a matter of time until she broke her prenuptial agreement, the one Gail had come up with and talked her into signing. John and Gail will be in England, so Molly will have to look for satisfaction elsewhere. But I'm willing to bet that even if she starts cheating with someone else, it will still be a breach of contract. I was fantasizing. I realized I couldn't blame myself for not thinking straight, given everything she dumped on me in the last 72 hours. I needed to cut my losses and move on. Based on her recent actions and declaration of love for John, I had very little faith in her ability to think straight. She'll probably run to a lawyer if I try to corner her. Heck, maybe she already had one as part of a backup plan with John and Gail. If she knew me even a little, she would understand how I feel and react to all this. The prenuptial agreement was most likely a ploy so she could spend her weekends. Maybe she and her lover will apply as soon as tomorrow. This would trump and preempt any other agreement, even Jalovo, and would be as simple as filing a statement of irreconcilable differences. I had already decided that I would wait until that bastard John and his sadistic wife left for England before filing for divorce, in case they tried another day off. Now I need to reconsider this. I could start working with my private investigator on Monday morning to be sure. I went online and separated our checking and savings accounts. I had credit cards in my name, and so did she. There was nothing special there. I started my company's payroll application, changed my direct deposit to a new separate account, and changed my insurance beneficiaries. Finally, I canceled Molly's health insurance. Bob Voss was our corporate attorney and golf buddy. I sent him an email asking him to find a tough divorce lawyer. Finally, I sent my private investigator an update outlining what I would need from him over the next 2 weeks. The yard needed some maintenance, but I decided that wouldn't be my problem after this weekend. Instead, I started packing my things. I filled the garage with large plastic containers and, just out of spite, stacked them neatly in her parking space after moving her car 2 doors down. I then packed my daily items into one large suitcase and one medium suitcase, plus a suit rack. As I was packing, I was thinking about what to write in the note I would leave for her. My ring will not be on display since she already had it. Then I decided, why leave a note at all? What is there to explain? I was dragging the last of my things to the front door when the bell rang. I opened the door with a bang, half expecting to see my cheating wife and her lover, or maybe that big bastard Larry. Instead, I was surprised to see a man in a cheap suit, accompanied by 2 police officers. Mr. Thomas Whitmore, I nodded, somewhat taken aback. I'm Detective Solomon. He showed his badge and some documents. We have a search warrant to search your premises. May we enter? I still haven't said a word. It was uncharacteristic for me, but different thoughts flashed through my head. That bastard John must have filed a complaint because I hit him. I didn't answer out loud. I just stood back and let them in. Mr. Whitmore, can we sit at the table while these officers execute the warrant? I have a few questions for you. He gestured toward the dining room, to the right of my vestibule. Of course, what are we talking about? Finally, I spoke. Are you going somewhere? Solomon looked at the door and my bags. I studied it for a few moments before answering. Yes, actually, I'm going to. Your wife is Molly, right? He asked, and I nodded. And do you know where she is now? Yes, I answered. He raised an eyebrow, indicating that I should say more. At the moment, I don't know where she is exactly. The last time I saw her, she was at her boss's lake house, about 50 miles from here. And when was this, Mr. Whitmore? Just after midnight on Friday night, I replied evenly. Again, what are we talking about? I was sure that Decker or his wife were trying to create more problems for me because I left. I need you to come to the station, he stated in an official tone. I have additional questions for you. I'm not going anywhere until you explain. The other officers returned with a kitchen knife in an evidence bag. They came up to me. Mr. Thomas Whitmore, you are under arrest on suspicion of murder. Place your hands behind your back, please. I was numb, literally numb in every sense of the word. The woman I loved and was married to for 15 years was dead. There will be no divorce, no reconciliation. Somehow, knowing that she was gone forever softened my perception of it. Alas, I will never see her again. I will never touch her soft cheek. I will never kiss her lips. I will never quarrel, scream, turn around, and leave. Everyone who was with Molly in that house was also dead, I was told. Larry's wife, Janet, had gone missing, and the detective had been trying to find out from me for 45 minutes where I had hidden her body. Solomon returned with a can of cola. Okay, Tom, let's start over. Over the past few hours, the detective and I had moved from formality to first names. Shouldn't I get a call or something? I asked, annoyed. Not yet, Tom, the detective said, taking a deep breath as if preparing himself. Unless you ask for a lawyer, I'm trying to give you a chance to be on the right side of this case to help yourself. We know why everyone was there. We also found your wedding ring. No one will blame you for losing your temper. In a fit of rage, that's quite understandable. Is that what happened, Tom? You were so hurt and felt so betrayed that you lost control for a moment. I already explained that, detective, I said with a sigh. I left the cabin late Friday night. I was home all weekend. But you have no witnesses, Tom, he objected. You tell me that your car was in the driveway, but you didn't go out all weekend. That sounds very convenient to me. Besides, when we came to search your house, we found a knife in your car and your bags were packed. When forensics will come back, I'm sure the murders happened while you were still at the lodge. I think the DA will agree. The easy way out is for you to just tell the truth. Now, why don't you tell me what really happened? I think I need a lawyer, detective. My call was to Bob Voss. Jesus, Tom, what's going on? We all saw it on the news. Where are you? Bob, I need help, I said in a hoarse voice. I'm at the station, under arrest. They think I killed Molly and her lover. Some other people that were at the cabin, covering for them. So they could. I need help, Bob. Tom, you need a criminal lawyer, and I'm a corporate lawyer. I can recommend someone I know well. He fell silent for a moment. Tom, you're going to have problems at work. I had a meeting with Mr. Winters and the board of directors from New York this morning. I see, Bob, I replied dryly. Guilty until proven innocent, right. Then I stopped because I still needed his help. Listen, can you call your friend and explain my situation? I'm at the 4th Street station. I'm innocent, Bob. Please believe it. Tell Mr. Winters that I plan to fight these false charges and will be out of here soon. I didn't kill anyone, Bob. You have to believe it. I burst into tears on the phone. It was too much. Okay, Tom, let me make the call and I'll do my best here. This is a difficult situation, but it's dynamic. Your presentation will help me when I talk to them. I'll remind them of our obligations to employees, but remember, Tom, you're in control, so they can easily freeze you or demote you to extinction. Can you come with your fr end? I almost begged. To hear my side, if it helps, then please. I can't do this, Tom, Bill stated flatly. Conflict of interest for a corporation and all that. My friend is Alvin Flint, Al for short. I'll talk to him informally after he's done with you here. He can fill me in on the matter. Hang in there, Tom. Mr. Whitmore. Call me Tom, please, I interrupted. And can I call you Al or Alvin? I can't stand all this formality. Of course, Tom, like I said, you're in trouble here, he muttered, turning over a stack of papers. That's putting it mildly. Let's see. They believe you were the last person to see all the dead alive. Mrs. Decker. Gail found the bodies on Saturday evening, around 10:30, and considering that you had the suspected murder weapon, there are no witnesses to corroborate your alibi with Friday night until Sunday morning. They plan to charge you. You'll be arraigned on Tuesday morning. We have to defend ourselves and counter the circumstantial evidence. Now, are you sure you didn't go out anywhere over the weekend? The gas station, the liquor store, any place? No, I replied, dejected. I told you I came home after midnight on Friday, got blackout drunk, and did pretty much the same thing on Saturday. Who would want to kill them? Was there a break-in? No, Tom. No sign of forced entry. Alvin looked up from his papers to meet my eyes. We don't have much information yet until we get the results of the analysis of the knife. That doesn't mean we can't prove your innocence. My team will start looking for CCTV footage of your route home. I'll need to get it tonight, please. Also, can you take off your shirt? Alvin saw my immediate look of confusion. Sorry, Tom, but I have to be thorough. Did they check you for defensive wounds? I just shook my head as I started to take off my shirt. Tom, he said in a way that made me look at him. We have something on our side. I don't see any cuts or bruises, and that's definitely in our favor. There are two other potential suspects besides you. They are Janet, the security guard's wife, and of course, Mrs. Decker herself. We also haven't seen the forensic results yet and let our own people analyze them. Tell me again about the events leading up to this weekend. Try not to miss anything. I was exhausted, but I realized that I was fighting for my life. If I were a police officer, I would consider myself the prime suspect. A distraught husband kills his wife and lover, leaving no witnesses. I'm sure that's how it would be presented in the newspapers and news. Hell, they've probably already started. I again told the whole sad situation, trying to be as accurate as possible. Where did the knife come from? He asked indifferently. I don't know. I answered with a shrug. I honestly didn't know. It's true. The detective said they found it in my car. But that can't be right because I didn't take the knife, and they were all alive when I left. If I had taken it, there wouldn't have been anything on it. Alvin seemed pleased with this development for some reason. The forensics on the knife should be ready in the morning. We'll see what they find. How well did you know Mr. and Mrs. Decker personally? Not very good, I said. I knew Jonah probably a little better. Every time my wife went with Jonah, I hired private investigators for 4 years. Wait, how did you hire them? Alvin asked, sitting up straight. Did you say 4 years? Yes, 4 different agencies, I replied. None of them found anything suspicious. Alvin thought for a moment and then asked, what was discussed in the interview with the detectives? I don't remember, I answered. I was shocked, to be honest. I'm still in shock. They, of course, put a lot of pressure on the confession, as far as I remember. They did everything to make me look like their person. The officer stuck his head in the door and said it was time to move me to the county jail. Alvin began gathering his papers to end our meeting. "Okay, give me the names of your agencies," he asked. "I'll see if they missed anything. I also want to take a look at their interview with you." The idea came to me when my lawyer started talking about the investigation. "Hey, can I get a copy of what they have on me? Not my personnel file, just what they found in the house. What evidence do they have?" "Of course," Alvin replied. "I will go over all of this with you immediately after the arrest. This is the point where I will politely ask if you are sure you want to see all the details." "I don't like it, but I need to see everything." Alvin nodded. "Exactly. Regardless of whether you testify or not, you are the best witness we have right now. I hope these private investigators give us something more. I'm not blaming the prosecutors or making wild accusations, but this is an elective year, and they have 4 dead bodies brutally murdered and 1 person still missing. They're looking at motive and opportunity, and you've got both, so it's going to be a bitter fight. We'll make a difference here. Stay vigilant in prison. Some of these macho idiots try to make a name for themselves right away, especially if they know they're going to a big place." I knew what he was trying to warn me about and needed no further explanation. We said goodbye. Minutes later, I was handcuffed, hands and feet, and driven to my new home in the area. Left alone in the police car, and finally coming down from the adrenaline, I wanted to cry thinking about Molly. I was pretty good at holding back my tears. Thought that in the short term, the best option would be to focus on anger at whoever killed her. On Tuesday morning, I pleaded not guilty and was remanded in custody without bail. It seems the DA considered me a flight risk. Alvin told me that murder charges almost never come with bail. Alvin asked if I was ready to look at the evidence as we walked down the hallway between the courtroom and the cells. I never thought I would ever see this part of the building. "Tom, these photos are graphic, and it's all terrible," Alvin warned. "You'll want to puke them all up as soon as you see them. I left the creepiest ones with Molly. Oh, and one more thing. The DNA found on this knife belongs to all 4 victims, but mostly Janet." He gave me time to process this, studying my face. "So this will be their theory now. You killed everyone, and for some reason you took Janet with you. They already towed your car to the crime lab." My lawyer was right. As soon as I saw the first photo of John and Molly, I turned my head to the steel bowl that was placed on the table and vomited everything that was in my stomach. All. Later, in my cell, my guts started churning again, and I barely made it to the toilet. My cellmate turned out to be a pretty good guy for a criminal and was quite talkative. He watched me vomit without saying or doing anything. Returning to his bed, he expressed sympathy and then proceeded to recount his misfortune for about 2 minutes. He didn't mind me reading my case papers. Finally, he asked, "So, what's your story?" "I don't want to talk about it," I replied, trying to look more courageous than I felt at the moment. "It'll probably help," he continued. "You know, talking about it and stuff." What the hell, right? Therapist, prisoner, and cellmate all rolled into one. What are the chances? And I told you. He listened patiently, saying little as I told him everything that led up to the weekend at the cabin. "So, this Janet girl is missing." He didn't wait for my answer. "She's involved, you know." "Dude, in my experience, these crimes always involve money. Find out who got the biggest score or who won the most, and there's your killer." His words carried weight. I've been thinking about Gail since I was first brought in for questioning. She refused the weekend, saying she would be too upset. Then she did show up on Saturday, conveniently finding the horrific scene too convenient. I began to realize that not only was she involved, but she was probably the one who set me up. I needed to talk to Alvin about this call. And where the hell was Janet? She seemed to love her husband, at least enough to die with him. I perked up a little, realizing that Alvin was right. There were still 2 people who had the opportunity besides me. Gail definitely had a motive mine, in fact. After my cellmate fell asleep, I went back to work in the dark. It was easier to look at photographs in almost complete absence of light, not for the eyes, but for the heart. Other photographs seemed unrelated to the crime, but I realized that certain things could be used later as theories were developed and discarded. The one that immediately caught my eye was a kitchen knife holder with one butcher knife missing. Gail and her lawyer detailed in their statement to Detective Solomon the lunch meetings she and John had with Molly. She described Molly as anxious, perhaps even afraid of her husband. This, of course, was not true, but I had no doubt that if we went to trial, she would continue to weave this web. She continued, "That's probably why she refused to have sex with my husband for the last 4 years. She framed me just as much as she framed my wife if she was in fact the murderer." Then it dawned on me that many people other than Gail or Janet could also have committed this crime. Perhaps John was involved in something illegal at work. Perhaps he was involved in fraud, and perhaps not with the company itself, but with a vindictive client. Perhaps he was hastily sent to London because of some scandalous act, and the company had to save its reputation. If this were true, Molly would almost certainly know about it and may have been involved. In fact, if Gail was involved, it seemed odd that she would put so much emphasis on the lovers' prenuptial agreements. Her behavior confused me. She seemed so eager to blame me that she did not realize or care that by doing so she was establishing her own motive for killing her husband and my wife. Lying in my dark cell, I began to get irritated. I just created more questions for myself and received fewer answers. The next morning after breakfast, I was taken to a small room with one table and two chairs. This was to be Alvin and I's meeting room for the next few weeks. "All your private investigators sent me everything they had on investigations," Alvin began. "I gotta say, this John Decker guy was crystal clear your wife, too. Guess I'll have to keep digging." The next meeting took place 3 days later on Friday, exactly a week after this nightmare. Alvin seemed surprised when I took the lead. "I need to sign some kind of statement giving you power of attorney, right?" I started. "Not a statement, but essentially yes," he replied. "You know, to cover expenses while you're here. Mortgage, utilities, etc." "Exactly," I continued. "I would like you and Bob to have Vasa. There was a joint power of attorney to pay bills and to protect my funds from being frozen by prosecutors. I have about 4K in my checking account and a little over 250K in my savings account. You can, of course, transfer the required amount to the current one. Here's a letter for my parents and another for Molly's parents." I stopped and handed him the envelopes. "One for my brother and one for my latest private detective. I want him to watch Gail day and night. I don't care how much it costs. I want to know when she goes to the bathroom. Tell him that now Gail will probably play the role of the grieving widow and won't make any major moves. After John's funeral, I want someone glued to her hip. I want him to start looking for Janet wherever the credit or debit card pings. I want him to find a way to monitor Gail's finances too. Any large deposits or withdrawals other than the insurance payout in the event of John's death. Let him know if she still plans to go to Europe after her husband's death." Alvin didn't like that last comment. "Tom, I know you have hatred and anger towards your wife's lover, but I am warning you right now. Do not talk about John Decker at all, unless you say something that is perceived as your regret for his departure. Consider that literally everyone here is an informer, because that's how it is. I will need to coordinate this with the prosecutor handing over your letter to Molly's parents," Alvin continued. "This is now the law. The Dawes office will almost certainly read your letter first, which means I will need to read it before giving it to them. Can I read it now in case I need to make changes?" I gave him permission. I could practically see the words in my mind as he read them himself. Mike and Lucille, Molly and I were very happy, it seemed to me. We were in love. I loved her, and in many ways I still do. 4 years ago, Molly fell in love with her boss. Her words, not mine. She told me she loved me, really, but was in love with John Decker. Again, her own words were spoken to me on the last day I saw her. Yes, I was arrested, and they have probably already accused some people of their thoughts. This is expected. I have big things to worry about. First, I need to organize my defense. Then find whoever killed my wife and your daughter. and finally make them pay. I will not rest until all three are completed. You know what kind of person I am and that I have never lied to you, so I won't say that thing. You should already know this. I didn't freak out or go crazy when Molly ambushed me this weekend at the lake. I just begged her to leave with me. Later on the first night, after seeing her by the pool with her lover, I was angry enough to confront him. Then I left. After a restless night, I was confident in my decision to divorce Molly. If she had come home as she promised, I would have done it. She knew how I felt about what she was doing. I will always miss Molly. I am truly sorry for our shared loss. When I find and deal with the culprit, you will be the first to know. Sincerely. Volume. Everything seems cleared, Tom, Alvin said, returning the letter to the envelope. I'm not sure what you mean by sorry there. The prosecutor might try to use that against you. Just leave it, Al. We can explain it. Alvin was not used to taking orders from his clients. My letter to my parents was completely different. They lived 5 states away from me, and since I was a late child, they were also older and less mobile. I assured them of my innocence and that I would soon reunite with them. I told them how much I loved them and asked them not to worry too much. I asked my brother Robert, everyone called him Buddy, to look after the house and take care of it, or just pay someone. I told him how to contact Alvin for money or something, and that I loved him. Alvin asked me a strange question. Tom, he began, have you ever seen Larry with a gun in the cabin? No, I answered. Never. Did he have a gun? Yes, and the cartridges were used, Alvin explained. Well, at least one shot was fired. Forensic evidence shows gunshot residue on Larry's dominant hand, and the bullet was found in the wall at the end of the hallway closest to the room you mentioned. The second cartridge was not found. This was strange to me, and Alvin also looked puzzled. I saw his mind working, wondering how this could help us. Life continued slowly over the next month. The courts were overloaded, as usual, so I had one goal: try not to go crazy in prison. The thought that I would not only find Molly's killer, but also take revenge, kept me going most of the time. Almost 30 days later, Alvin and I sat down again for a meeting. I wasn't prepared for what he told me. Tom, he began, I just talked to the district attorney an hour ago. They're ready to go to trial. He raised his hand, seeing that I was about to snap. Tom, even with our evidence, your phone location, the initial interview with detectives, numerous cameras along the route home, they are still confident, otherwise they would not have gone to trial. Mrs. Decker has fully cooperated, and her lawyer has provided an alibi for most of the time between you leaving and the time she allegedly found the crime scene. They offered a deal. Let me explain the deal first, then I'll answer your questions and explain how I think we should proceed and why, okay? Recommends commutation of sentence. Considering the stress you were under that day, it will still land you in jail for a long time. Why are they suggesting something like this? I asked, amazed. They think this case is closed. No, they don't count, said Alvin. It's going to be a fight for both sides. They know we have our corners. They're also fully aware that you're already rotting in a cell and bearing all the risk. That's how the game is played. Okay, I stuttered. It was confusing. Then why offer, especially if they know there are other suspects? 2 things, as far as I can see, Alvin reminded me, beginning to explain. The knife in your possession and the fact that it's an election year, that's why they're willing to go to trial. But if you take the deal, the DA will be able to tell a story that will sound good in the newspapers. You're getting a little less punishment because you're in an epic situation. A tangle of infidelity and unbearable cruelty, and ultimately took responsibility for his outburst of rage, saving the state the cost of a trial and the victim's loved ones the pain of a public spectacle. This is how order works, Vol. We were both silent for several minutes. Alvin and I developed a strange bond. He was the messenger I always wanted to kill, but there were times when I thought I really loved him. He was a straightforward and honest man. Tom, he said softly, I can't tell you what to do. I can't do it because I can't predict the future. As your lawyer, I suggest you trust me and go to trial. Their evidence is circumstantial, and ours shouldn't be as solid as theirs in theory. Your alibi isn't perfect, but it's better than decent. They have a knife with everyone's DNA in it, and in such a condition that they can probably prove it's the murder weapon. They have Larry's gun with 2 bullets missing, but only one is found. We still have Gail, but more importantly Janet, because she didn't show up. Gail is the key here. We not only have reasonable doubt, but also a chance to make her a credible suspect. I decided to trust Alvin. We went to court. There were many emotional ups and downs as the trial went on. Some days were better than others, although I was hardly qualified to keep score. Some days I thought Alvin's cross-examination went very well. Other days it seemed like he was just checking boxes while the accusation rolled over me. Alvin kept reminding me that Gail was the key. She was supposed to be the last witness for the prosecution, so we were both playing the same game. The prosecutor was betting that she would be the emotional star of the witness stand, and Alvin was hoping to prove her guilty. With reasonable doubt as the goal, we had an easier task. "I object, Your Honor," Alvin exclaimed with full force. "Leading issue." "I withdraw the question," said the prosecutor, returning to his desk. He was just talking about my state of mind during the phone call between Gail and I that Friday afternoon. No matter how many words he tried to put into Girl's mouth in the form of questions, she did not fulfill the role needed to make me a killer. Gail was on the stand for 3 days, playing the role of a poor, grieving widow who was about to start a new life in London with her husband. I saw through her act, but as the accused, I couldn't just stand up, point my finger and scream, "She's lying, that's it." I kept telling myself that Alvin would get his turn. I tried to pay attention to everything, but 3 days is a long time, and direct questioning could become very boring. My thoughts wandered. Would I also be dead if I stayed in the house? I thought about it a lot and came to the conclusion that yes, Gail would kill me without hesitation. I believed that their meetings and prenuptial agreement were just a smokescreen to pretend that she really wanted to separate the couple in the future. They also helped create the impression that she truly loved John. My theory was that John told her how he felt about Molly. Heck, he straight up admitted that he loved her and wanted to sleep with her. This would be difficult for any spouse to accept, and for someone like Gail, it would be impossible. The real question was whether Gail was devilish enough to turn her anger into cold steel, planning not only his death, but everyone else's, and then carrying it out without a doubt. Could she even pull it off? I don't think I could have stabbed 4 other people to death well. I don't think I could have successfully killed them all that way anyway. Larry was there specifically to keep an eye on me to make sure I didn't cause any problems. The biggest guy I've ever met, so he was wary of my presence and my movements. I leaned over to discuss this with Alvin. We had this habit. I would notice something slightly out of order or out of place, mention it, and he would write it down in his notebook for further discussion during the break. The private investigator's reports made me feel even worse than when they came up empty on John and Molly. Gail was indeed the grieving wife organizing John's funeral. Her family came regularly to help with John's chores and recycling various household items. I learned that Gail was still planning to move to Europe. This was a surprise. Again, she seemed to be flirting dangerously close to looking guilty. The prosecution outlined the reasons for her move. She already had a house that they had set up before the murder. She also had a job with a major London charity. And where the hell was Janet? Alvin's cross-examination was a real attack. The prosecutor repeatedly objected to Alvin's line of questioning. Why did she and John hire a big guy like Larry if she wasn't bothered by her ridiculous plan to begin with? Gail replied that that was the reason. Everyone, including my wife, was concerned about my so-called temperament. Luckily, Alvin called several witnesses from Molly's circle to dispute these claims, but as Gail's cross-examination continued, I became increasingly confident that Alvin had been right all along. The jury should have suspected her because of her own testimony. That afternoon, Alvin switched directions with Gail to discuss why he and John hired Janet. "You don't know what, Mrs. Decker," Alvin pressed her. That the woman of easy virtue you hired will be adequate, or that your husband is going to enter into an extramarital affair. More shocked whispers from the audience. The judge frowned and raised his gavel. "Objection!" shouted the district attorney. "Your Honor, he is clearly taunting the witness, and with due respect to the deceased, I ask that this word be stricken from the record. She was a sex worker." "The protest is accepted," replied the judge, although he ordered the entry, "woman of easy virtue." "Answer the question, Mrs. Decker." "That she will be adequate," was Gale's much quieter response. "And could you please tell the court how much you paid for these services?" Alvin continued. Gale fell silent, as if trying to understand where this interrogation was leading. 2,000. "It's quite expensive, isn't it?" She was not. She was not a woman of easy virtue. She was a high-class escort. "And yet you weren't sure?" Alvin continued to press. "No." Gale found herself in a difficult position. "I don't know Tom, Molly's husband, that well. We've met a few times at corporate events, so I wasn't sure." "Why not ask Molly?" My brilliant Alvin asked the obvious question. "I mean, you planned this whole thing with her and your husband in numerous meetings, right? Or was it your husband's idea to hire this escort?" "Objection, Your Honor, bullying of a witness." The district attorney was angry. "Accepted," the judge said immediately. "Do you have a point here, Mr. Solomon? If so, let's get to it." "Thank you, Your Honor." Alvin turned to Gale, leaning his forearm on the rail of the witness chair. "I'll rephrase that. Mrs. Decker, why weren't you at the cabin that weekend?" I didn't think I could handle it, seeing it with my own eyes." The lying bitch even shed real tears. "But it was okay for Tom, my client, to see it with his own eyes, wasn't it?" Alvin continued to press. "He was part of your plan, just like all the other actors, right?" "No!" Gale almost screamed. I needed him to see what was going to happen. Live. Yes, I knew it hurt him, as it did me, but I needed him to know that, and be there, at least for a while, to make sure that he would control his wife in the future. I didn't know he would react like that. He'll go crazy and kill everyone." "I object, Your Honor. A guess," Alvin said, as if he knew it would be. "Accepted. Put it on the record so that the last two sentences are crossed out." "So, Mrs. Decker, let's get this straight." I could tell Alvin was getting ready for the big pitch. "You came up with this so-called plan. You blackmail your husband, and his potential mistress essentially made her your husband's mistress, giving her a free pass, and then tricked her husband into being there too? Something else? This is pure evil, but of course you're repentant now, so I guess it's all right." "I object, Your Honor." The district attorney lost his patience. "Accepted," the judge said immediately. "Final warning, Mr. Solomon." "Okay, Mrs. Decker, let's try again," he said in a low, purposeful tone. "Why did you want Molly's husband there, first, last, or for any other reason?" Gale thought for a moment. "Women are different from men. We can share love and sex. I could give my husband this gift and then forgive him under the right conditions that I set and carefully thought about. I expected Tom, Mr. Whitmore, to be upset, confused, and probably his male ego and pride would be greatly bruised. Like I said, I don't know him that well. Perhaps he was the kind of man who loves a little on the side, and this wouldn't be a big problem. When I talked to him on the phone, I realized that I had made a serious mistake. He was beyond angry." The prosecutor replayed my conversation with Gale on that fateful Friday. Conveniently, she gave Molly her home number, and of course it was all recorded. This didn't bode well since I said things to her that definitely made me look bad, especially to strangers, like the jury. I didn't like the way it was going, but Alvin prepared me and told me what to expect. We played a long game, trying to make small holes in the web. He knew everything there was to know about Gale and the others. The plan was to keep her back on the witness stand until she gave herself away. In fact, she only needed to create reasonable doubt. "But wait," said Alvin, pretending to be confused. Didn't we just hear you testify that everyone was concerned about Tom's terrible temperament, and that was why Mr. Larry Bleeker was there in the first place? The prosecutor took a step. The judge raised an eyebrow. Alvin didn't back down. Your Honor, he said, I asked a question. I asked Mrs. Decker if she remembered that she had just given evidence that she had prior knowledge of Tom's terrible temperament, and that was why she carried out this plot. Rephrase, lawyer, said the judge with a sigh. Of course, Your Honor, Alvin replied. Mrs. Decker, did you or did not know that my client had a terrible temper when you organized this plot? Gail was silent on this question and looked for salvation with her eyes. I followed her gaze to the prosecutor's desk and then to the judge. She didn't find anything. After a few moments, she began to cry, an old trick for women when they are backed into a corner. Sobbing, but no real tears. At that moment, I definitely understood, and I swear I will get my revenge one way or another. During the time window when the coroner declared the victims dead, my vehicle was recorded heading home, away from the lodge, by cameras from businesses and individuals along the way. My lawyer got it all. I was surprised that this wasn't the end. The prosecutor did his best to have the coroner testify that he could not pinpoint the time of death to the minute. This made the case weak, and Alvin's cross-examination was devastating. 3 days later, after Gail had completed her testimony, I sat in court, waiting while the lawyers and the judge were in chambers. Alvin finally returned with the others. What's happening? I asked as soon as he approached the table. As your lawyer, he said, seemingly delighted, it's my job to tell you everything about your case, so if you insist, I will, but I ask you to trust me again. I think you'll like it, but I want everyone in this room to see the look on your face this afternoon. Can you trust me? I simply nodded. I was pretty exhausted by this time, and, for someone who liked to be in control of situations, I was greatly tested by relying on Alvin. To my surprise, after a long morning and lunch break, the trial resumed and Alvin called Gail back to the witness stand. Mrs. Decker, Alvin began. We've already taken up so much of your time, so let's get straight to the point. Did you know that your security guard, Larry, was carrying a firearm that weekend at the lodge? All the color drained from Gail's face. I think the phrase, looked like a ghost, is more than appropriate here. No, she answered weakly. Do you have any knowledge of why he might have fired that weapon up there? Alvin asked. No, I don't know anything about it. Her face said otherwise. I don't know what my face showed. I know I was stunned. Private investigators did double duty and cost me a fortune. On the other hand, they saved my life. After the crime scene was cleared by forensic scientists, my people went there in theory. Larry's gun was identified at the scene as his. The county forensics team searched the entire second floor and the stairwell leading down to the dining room, looking for this second cartridge. They found nothing, but the detectives worked on pure logic. Larry shot in self-defense. For most of the day, my men found nothing, and neither did the county experts, until one of them saw a painting hanging at the top of the stairs that looked out of place. As soon as he took it off the wall, he noticed something else very suspicious. Finally, he found a patch of wood putty about the size of the tip of his little finger. After scraping a little with his knife, he found the missing bullet. No more questions, Mrs. Decker, Alvin said with confidence. The prosecutor did not cross-examine. Alvin called the forensic scientist back to confirm that the second round actually came from Larry's gun. The closing arguments were a bloodbath. Alvin walked the tightrope between facts and theater like the professional he probably was. He did this judo maneuver where he laid out every reasonable doubt in my case, and then falsely apologized to the jury for accidentally telling them the case in Gail's favor, which apparently the prosecution fully accepted since she never was arrested or even properly investigated. By the time he was done, she looked pretty guilty and the state looked pretty incompetent. Alvin waited until the not guilty verdict to rejoice. He said those closing arguments were like a wet dream. I gave him his moment. He deserved it. Finally, I returned home to a lonely, empty house. Luckily, my brother and his wife at least kept it clean and dust-free. I cried for a long time. The first thing I really wanted to do was take a hot shower in my own bathroom. Then everything came flooding back to me. I sat on the tile floor, curled up and sobbed until the water turned cold. It was one of the most non-male things I've ever done, but I felt so much better after it. Everything was taken from me. My wife, my pride, my dignity. Some friends and relatives who were still convinced of my guilt despite my acquittal were also lost. All this was taken away by John fucking Decker and him icy-hearted wife. She moved to Europe a week after her last day of testimony. I'm sure the payout on John's death made her smile like a bloody buffoon when she flew first class to Heathrow. Instead of getting most of his things through some quickly thrown together, meaningless prenuptial agreement, she now had all of his and all of hers. Whether the insurance company would pay out was another matter, but even if they didn't, she would be covered for life. Now I had to play my long game. She'll screw up, just like every liar and cheater. Then I will get my justice. Molly's parents did not respond to my letter. There were no visits from them to the prison either. Of course, my parents were delighted and spent most of the first week at home taking care of me. I don't think I've ever eaten so well. Mom did not hide her desire to fatten me. They flew to the trial at great expense, both financial and physical. One night, I was sitting in the backyard with my father. This was something we've done a few times since Molly and I bought this house when my parents were well enough to come over. That night, we sat in thoughtful silence, looking at the stars in the northern sky. I sipped my scotch, enjoying it after months without it. My father broke the silence. So who do you think did it? The father was very reserved in his tone. I thought about his question. I don't know, Dad, I said. He chuckled slightly. Really? No idea. It's better for you not to know. In case everything goes wrong, I stammered. And what will happen to my son? He turned to me. After all is said and done. I haven't figured that out yet, Dad. If you need help anything, Tom, promise you'll call me. Please. Mom and I worried every day that we'd lost you. I never want to go through that hell again. I may be old, but I still have a lot of tricks up my sleeve. Up your sleeve, and a few good friends, acquaintances too. My father always supported me, and here he is again at his best. If I had to, I would have brought him in out of respect, but I loved my father and didn't want to lose anyone else close to me. It also seemed like a burden that I had to bear. No one had to know that I felt like less of a man. Couldn't hold his wife, couldn't stop her and her lover. Couldn't protect her in the end. Even if she conspired to turn me into an unwilling and conscious cuckold, she is now gone. Regardless of whether she could see me from somewhere, it didn't really matter. I had to see this through. It was personal in a way that few could understand. Gail was a monster. She took the love that Molly and John had built, no matter how painful and wrong it was, and used it against them. She was probably courting her once she decided to kill them. To her, I was just a pawn. She thought she had gotten rid of all the witnesses. By this time, she must have known that I was free, and therefore there was one loose end left. As much as I wanted justice, I still had to be careful. Gail should not be underestimated. Daddy, I promise. And Daddy, I love you. Almost 18 months after my arrest. $19,000 spent. When I received the call, I almost wet myself with joy. The man we were looking for was hiding in plain sight, and where he was hiding spoke volumes. I called my father, told him where I was going, and asked him to kiss my mother for me. I made 2 other calls before booking my flight. Gail walked through the door of her luxury condominium with her friend and lover on her tail. It seemed to be a day of shopping, makeovers, and new outfits from head to toe. I knew from my investigator that the annual charity ball was taking place this weekend, and that Gail had been hanging out with influential people for a long time. Taking 2 steps after throwing her many bags in the hallway, she stopped, frozen in place. In the living room sat a face from the past. The woman behind Gail almost collided with her, and then also froze in place. Fight or flight was the first expression I saw on Gail's face, but she'd played it calm and confident for so long that it was almost a second. She recovered quickly. Volume. She said it as an affirmation and put on a fake half smile. What a surprise. How did you get into my house? The question was full of contempt and accusations. I just sat quietly with a more genuine smile on my face. I could see that this bothered her. She was good, but not that good. That's why I'm not in prison. Hi, Gail. I slowly tilted my head to the side to address the other person in the room, standing behind her lover, practically hiding. Janet, I said without expression. Nice to see you again. Janet's eyes, which had previously looked with horror, quickly found an interesting place on the expensive carpet at the sound of her name. Gail decided that the best defense was an attack. Okay, Tom. Gail spoke in her best arrogant voice, radiating friendliness. How can I help? You felt right at home in mine. Should I check my office? My jewelry storage? Janet can go to the cupboard and count the silver while I check around. No more nonsense, Gail. I answered forcefully. You know why I'm here? With a mocking smile, Gail crossed her arms and said, Why, Tom, I really don't know, in a fake Southern accent. Then her expression suddenly changed, her fake smile giving way to an evil smirk. But I have all your attention. With a sigh, I said, Why don't you both don't sit down? We have a lot to discuss, and we must do it while I still have patience. I don't mean to be rude, Gail replied, but you have a lot of nerve to tell me to sit down after breaking into my house. How about I just call the police? I pulled the thick envelope out of my sports jacket and tossed it onto the glass coffee table. Gail, we can do this the hard way if you prefer, or you and Janet will just sit down. The envelope was filled with a lot of nonsense, but I saw it coming. You see, I've made it my business to know every little thing about Gail Decker ever since I was acquitted. Her first instinct was to escape the situation through intimidation. She had become so self-confident, even more self-confident than before the murders, and this would be her undoing. The couple looked at each other and then sat down on the sofa opposite me. Gail reached for the envelope. No, it's too early, Gail. Let's talk first. She sat back down and folded her hands in her lap, taking a deep breath. I noticed Janet, then really noticed her. With her new strawberry blonde hair cut short now and the 10-15 kilograms she had lost, it was no wonder it took investigators so long to connect the dots. I leaned back, placing my right hand on the back of the chair. I wanted to take a relaxed position, but with confidence. So, Janet, I asked, are you back from the dead, or are you just enjoying life? She didn't answer, so I continued. I mean, Thailand really changed you. It's like they took 20 years off of you. That's enough, Tom, Gail growled. Let's get to the point. I'm getting tired of this, and I'm still thinking about pressing charges for the hacking. This is exactly what I wanted. Well, I have to say England hasn't helped your manners, Gail, I said, leaning forward. Okay, compensation, Gail. That's what this meeting is about. You took everything from me, including my dignity, to live large. You owe me, bitch. I wasn't sure how well I played the role of seemingly losing control, but they both bought it wholeheartedly. Tom, I have no idea, she began. No more theatrics, Gail. I pointed at Janet. I was in jail, bitch. I was in jail. I waited and then endured a trial, accused of murdering this traitor. I think you were locked up for the murder of my husband. She smiled as she said this. Among other things. Little prick, she called Molly a thing. Your choice of lawyers saved you from punishment for your crime, but here you are again. You don't seem very smart to me, Tom. Here it is. She felt like she had the advantage, and her body language showed it. It was time to cut the rug out from under her feet. I pulled the photo out of my pocket and unfolded it, then placed it on the table where they could both see. Whose DNA do you think is on the knife? I asked, not addressing any of them in particular. Janet broke down much sooner than I expected, but it saved me a lot of time and hassle. Gail noticed it on her face moments after I did. Don't you dare say a word, Janet, she ordered her submissive mistress. Be quiet and let me discuss this with Tom. Go to the bedroom and lie down. I sat up straight, slowly drawing the Glock 9 on him from the holster under my sports jacket, placing it in my lap. Don't go, Janet. Stay with us. I wouldn't want to make a mess of those antique rugs. Gail looked at the front door. I could tell what she was thinking. This won't work, Gail, I said without emotion. You can't outrun a bullet. You too can't overpower me either. You can try calling the police, or whatever they call it here, but that will only land you both in jail for murder. Of course, they'll probably want to take me too. This could give you an opportunity to escape, so I will be forced to shoot you both in the leg before the police arrive. Okay, Tom, how much? In an instant, she changed her tone again. Damn, the cold-blooded bitch was good. I pretended to think about her question. How much? Now that's a problem, isn't it? On the one hand, you saved me a lot of money on the divorce. A lot of time, too. That must count for something, I guess. On the other hand, I think your plan was to take all of John's money, which is what you did, and the insurance payout while I was your pawn. How much was John worth, Gail? About $8 million, she said without emotion. What about his property? His assets? I asked. It should have been a lot more. Did you get the insurance payout? It was so much that she didn't want to talk. That's enough, she declared. Enough so that Janet and I can live comfortably. So, you two are lovers? I asked, already knowing the answer. Probably before Larry found out the hard way. We're lovers, yes, Tom. Gail chuckled. It didn't start long after Larry started working for the company. We were together for almost 4 years. Who cares? I laughed in response. Speak up, Gail. I want the details of that night. What I hear might even influence how much I decide to take. I waved the gun for effect. Sorry, Tom, she replied with a grin. I wonder if you're wearing something to write this down. I chuckled slightly, too loudly for my comfort, looking her straight in the eyes. If I had, the cops would have already come through that door, you stupid bitch. My answer dripped with contempt. You don't understand. You're no longer in management, Gail. I want to know the what and the why. I want the details. Then, and only then, we'll talk about the money I want now, at least. I'm sure that I'll be back when they're gone. You're the gift that keeps on giving, Gail, whether you like it or not. I looked Janet straight in the eye. Now I give orders, Janet. She will talk, and we will listen, okay? Next time she tells you something and you listen, I'll shoot through her knee. If you want to push a wheelchair for the rest of your life, go ahead. Gail laid it all out. She was the dominant brain that planned it all. Janet wasn't needed for the cooking that weekend, just to create more doubt about my innocence. Gail gave her a fake passport before the police came to my house on Sunday morning. Janet was already on the flight to Bangkok. She spent a year there with close friend Gail and worked hard to lose weight. Before moving to London 6 months ago, she also needed to change her hairstyle and color. Okay, Gail, I interrupted. Let's hear about that night. Don't leave anything out, or you'll lose something important to you today. Can we at least have some tea? She asked. No, Gail. I pointed the gun at her head. No tea. She told everything about that night and how she killed everyone. What bothered me was that she seemed to be enjoying the story. The pair of lovers then headed towards Janet's house. She had a suitcase full of new clothes hidden in the living room closet. Fake passport? I asked. It probably cost a little money. Yes, Tom. She took a deep breath before reaching for her bag. Hey, don't do that. I waved my pistol. Calm down, Tom. I'm just taking out my checkbook. How much do you want? Damn it. I spat. You think I'll let you get off that easy? She actually giggled. Gail had nerves of steel that her late husband could only dream of. If I had hit her then, I might have broken my leg. Tom, I think you should check the definition of prostitute, she replied, enjoying herself. It's Molly, not me. I'm many things, but not this. You don't seem to understand yet, but I did you a very big favor. You don't strike me as the kind of person who could accept what John and Molly did to you, make a damn fool and a cuckold out of you. I wasn't surprised that it was revealed at the trial that you had been following them for 4 years. But you should know she would ruin you in a divorce. You live in a state where divorce for unjust reasons is not possible, and besides, you were complicit in her infidelity. You were there, remember, exactly where I wanted you to be. Now, name the number. At that moment, the front door opened. Police, open the door. Gail looked at me with fury and disbelief. She shook her head as if reprimanding me as a mother. You are a stupid, stupid man, she reproached. I lifted your burden and could make you very rich, maybe even include you in all the fun Janet and I are having. But no, you just have to have a conscience. You lifted my burden, you vile bitch. You killed my fucking wife and tried to take my freedom. I was losing control, and that was to her advantage. Gail came at me with full force. This move took me by surprise. Help, police, here, help, she screamed in her best acting performance, I must admit. At the last second, I regained control and fired. Interpol and local authorities entered as I dropped my weapon. The police assessed the situation and shouted at me to lie face down on the floor and put my hands behind my head. I was handcuffed and placed back in the same chair as the paramedics rushed to Gail. Janet just sat there, stunned, until officers took her into another room. More and more policemen came in, and finally I saw one I recognized. "Are you okay, Tom?" asked Inspector Miles Standish. "Sorry about the procedure, but you weren't supposed to have a firearm, let alone shoot someone." I grinned at the man who helped me organize it all. "Well, it's a good thing I had a weapon." She came straight at me. "Why were you gone so long?" I spent the rest of the day at the police station, giving my testimony, which, of course, was confirmed by the recording from the device I was wearing. The next day, my lawyers served Gail and Janet. Summons immediately after their arrest. We worked out the details for several months, leading up to the meeting. Rich, dishonest people almost never get caught, so I knew I had to enjoy this victory. Too many others were left without justice. Both women were extradited to the United States, convicted, and put on trial. Gail, for her part, remained stoic and defiant. This really helped my civil case. As her trial unfolded, her testimony in my case fell apart. In the end, I was awarded a 7-figure settlement, even after attorneys' fees, for their role in deceiving me, humiliating me, and most importantly, killing my wife. After the trial, I returned to Europe, determined to start a new life and close this chapter. I ended up going to the Caribbean, buying a small house in the Turks Islands. I liked the weather, and I had 3 regular women to share my bed with. However, on the rare nights when I am alone, I often think about Molly. I think of all we've lost simply because she fell in love with her boss and then recklessly fell into his wife's sick, twisted plot for revenge. It saddened me for us and for everyone who knew Molly. She didn't deserve it, at least in my eyes. So I tried to live my life as if today could be my last, in honor of my late wife. Of course, we wouldn't have stayed together if she had survived. With death separating us and her killer making me rich, I think I can afford to be generous. It truly was a fateful weekend, not just a wrong one. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.